Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Those Coffee People podcast. I'm Melany, and today we'll be going deeper into how not only build a coffee community with your customers, but also how to build a team loyalty. We'll discuss how to craft a narrative that resonates with people, the parallels between customer loyalty and employee loyalty. Also, how which strategies help a small business grow while keeping its identity strong. So, we're here with Rory, owner of Ugly Dog, and okay, let's start.
Yeah, I'm Rory Van Grool, Ugly Duck Coffee in Rochester, New York, owner operator. So we're a small multi-roaster coffee shop in Rochester, New York, and I know New York is a big state. So we're 6 hours north west of New York City. So if that gives anyone a geographical sense of where we are, we're in between two other cities, Syracuse and Buffalo. Ugly Duck Coffee started almost about 10 years ago as a multi-roaster and as a mobile pop-up espresso bar serving events like weddings, corporate events. And then after about a year, we opened up our cafe space, which is about 900 square feet. And we've been in the same location in downtown Rochester since. So that's kind of the snapshot of who and what we are. And we have about 10 employees. And yeah.
Great. Thank you for that little context. So, take us back to the early days when Ugly Dog was starting. I read something. So, to confirm, you were hardcore and punk singer. I'm not sure how true is that, but yes, how was the changing? What happened? How did you start like in the coffee business?
Yeah, so I got started in specialty coffee when I was living in Providence, Rhode Island. My roommate at the time, Devlin Rice, wonderful human, he was working at a place called New Harvest Coffee Roasters. And we were talking, and he said I should apply there based on the fact that he was like making coffee. And I was like, why is this coffee taste so much better than any other coffee I've had? And then he started talking about the process and what it took to get it into tasting good and the origin story of the coffees that they work with. And I really just fell in love with that. And so I applied and I got a job working in their roastery, and they were just a wholesale company roasting coffee. And so, roasted coffee, I didn't roast any coffee, but I was bagging coffee, blending coffee, delivering coffee. And it was just a really great like-minded folks that cared about music. This is connecting to being in hardcore and punk bands. It was just more about creative folks that cared about not only the people around them, but the products they were consuming. So it just felt right. It felt like I found the space, I found the people, and I found an industry that didn't judge me based on what I didn't know. I mean, was willing to teach and empower and educate people around them. And I really gravitated towards that and loved it and still do. So Devlin got me into being really excited about coffee. And then I was in a band, and a bunch of other people at that roastery were also in bands, in various types of bands, and still are, which is pretty wild. And
That's
so
great.
somehow the roastery, New Harvest, still exists. There's still a company doing, like, even grown more since I've left Providence. The cool thing is, I don't think, like, being involved in hardcore and punk music helped me understand that there's a way you can do things that isn't typical. And it helped me understand that you can build something based on people. And coffee was the same way. It was very people focused, people oriented. And that's what I've found to gravitate towards is people-centered things, much like I grew up skateboarding. So it was very much an individual activity, but you could do it yourself and or you did it with other folks. The people are the thing that really kept me connected to skateboarding, keeps me connected to hardcore and punk music and playing in bands and coffee as well, as that's the other part of serving a really delicious cup of coffee is great, but what really brings me back is the people I'm working with, the connections I'm making, and knowing the coffees that we're serving are doing something more. It's more than just a beverage. There's a connection and story behind each coffee that we're serving and each roaster we're connecting with. So those are kind of like the little connection points throughout the way. But yes, staying and yell in hardcore and punk bands. I have since I was 16. I'm 44 now and still do it in a very less active way, but still do it. Still, it's a way to hang
I
out
still
with, you know?
great. I love that you mentioned that you didn't feel judged by not knowing. And also, I think coffee industry is where you can feel free to do other things, but your main focus is coffee. So, based on these items, I want to ask you, what was the point to build the storytelling behind Ugly Dog? Of course, there's a connection there with people, with origin, and with your personal experience when you start like joining the coffee industry. So yes, I want to understand like how was to build the storytelling behind that.
Yes, I mean, I think for me, it's very much just organic and authenticity. And for me personally and our team, I want people to be able to show up authentically and who they are and and accept them for what they bring to the table that isn't necessarily coffee focused, because we can teach coffee, right? Like if we're in an industry, we can teach folks how to make coffee. We can teach people how to communicate about coffee. But what often we can't teach is empathy and the understanding of receiving folks that don't know. And we also don't know what they don't know. So we can't assume that, right? The ultimate story that we try to tell is just like kindness, right? And ultimately that connection that we can make on a day-to-day basis or weekly basis or monthly basis is just receiving people openly, honestly, and authentically. And hopefully that builds that level of trust and understanding. And we can share little bits of stories of ourselves, but then also the folks that we partner with along the way. And that could be the intentional bakers that we bring in and we connect with, and the roasters that we bring in, and the coffee producers that we connect with, and allowing our staff we give them the information, but allow them to communicate it in a way that makes sense to them as well.
Yes, that's great because it's also other brands joining you. Not only they are like providing you, they are also not only brands, people behind with different personalities, different backgrounds, and all of these luggage with them,
Mm-hmm.
right? That you want to integrate everything. So, how do you make sure your brand story is consistent across your shop, across your online presence, and yeah, even your customer interactions when someone arrive to the coffee shop and they interact with a new person? How do you make sure your brand storytelling is behind that?
Yeah. That's something we often talk about in the shop, and we always have to readjust that, especially when we bring on new folks onto our team. And honestly, it's very simple, but it's also hard. And that is just to recognize that folks are coming and going, regardless of how busy you are or how in the moment you are about making a drink. It is okay to look up from what you're doing, acknowledge people. So that is like the big thing, is like our bar is set up very much like a front facing bar. So we often don't have our back turned towards folks. So we can recognize people when they walk in and when they walk out. So we like to acknowledge them when they come in and when they leave. And it makes people feel seen. It makes people feel appreciated. And the big thing for our team and for ourselves as well is we don't force connection. We don't force people to be happy. You know what I mean? Like if someone's like having
Yes.
a day, like this is a people business, and we can understand that that's a stressful space to be in. And
Definitely.
we can navigate within that scope, serving folks by serving ourselves and our other team members that are on by switching positions. Or someone can communicate, hey, I'm not really feeling up to this task today. Can we just so you know, and that person can pick up some emotional labor if needed. It's not always about showing up and being present for the guest all the time. It's also showing up and being present for the team that you're working alongside, because that raises the energy and feeling of support. And that translates then to the guest experience.
I really like that to also slow down. Like customer service, a lot of people think that the one who's serving, it's always happy, it's always has to be in the perfect attitude. And it's not always like that. Sometimes we also have a bad day, something happened, anything can happen. Customers also want to understand, should understand that. And we also want to understand that customers not always want, even if they are paying, they not always want to say hi or they
Right.
want to be listened. And yes, it's something like side to side, a win-win.
Yeah, and people also, guests understand forced interactions and a playbook of, well, I said this, now I have to say this, and now I have to say this. And if there isn't that, but you have a genuine kindness and excitement or feeling towards someone else, that goes a longer way and creates a deeper connection and a playbook of things that we have to say.
Yes.
Just
The
taking
speak.
someone's name isn't going to really connect that person in the long grand scheme of things, you know? So this even circles back to an online social media presence, right? Sometimes I get asked to talk at like some college classes and talk about social media and talk about marketing. And while those tools are great uses, they're often changing. You know, we have gone from Snapchat to not using Snapchat a lot to TikTok to like, and all these variables are coming and going. So as a small business owner where you have limited resources and the learning curve to do those things really well are so high, and you can put so much energy into it, but does that really make a deeper connection with the guests that are coming into your business? So what do you value more, like how it looks to maybe someone across the country or the folks that are coming into your shop? And I personally value that word of mouth and that interaction a lot more. So that's what I encourage our team to really focus energy on, and building those intimate relationships in the shop and between each other. And hopefully that translates to the guest experience in the long run. So slow and steady kind of wins the race is my mentality in building those relationships and building a community. It doesn't just happen because you got an extra 1,000 followers on Instagram. It's really the day in, day out, slow build that I value.
So based on this, we already talked about directly to the brand, but we want to also talk about the product and the purpose of the product. You change to like the first question you ask yourself when you start in the coffee industry was why this coffee tastes better like the usual coffee. So we want to understand like what was the purpose product in Ugly Dog and how is like because I think connection is the main character but also coffee has to be as good as the connection. So
Yes.
yes, what is the role in the coffee of the coffee?
Yeah. So, yeah, like you said, like the coffee has to be good for people to also come back, especially for those folks that don't necessarily they want to feel seen, but necessarily they don't want to engage in conversation. Right? They're coming for a reason, and the quality aspect is super important because of the industry that we're in. It's about the care and the human value that it takes to get there. Right? So you have folks that are in regions that are taking the utmost care to ensure that there is a value to care for, you know, and we're the last step in that chain is to highlight and not get in the way of these coffees in different origins with different flavors that are naturally inherent to that, right? As someone that personally doesn't drink alcohol or doesn't, um, you know, consume a lot of products outside of like water. Like coffee is my drink of choice that I can evaluate and I have some sense of, oh wow, there's more to it than just something with caffeine in it. It is a beverage that can be savored and connected to and enjoyed because of the flavor, and having that experience and understanding that someone took the time in so many ways, not just someone, but so many people took the time to get it to that point is just so amazing to me. And then the fact that we can have an impact from where we are into their lives is also super important for us to highlight and to hopefully share, so we can have those connections across the world.
That's awesome. That's really important to connect with the origin, not only to have a direct connection, like talk to the coffee producers, but also to feel like the ownership of the whole chain. Like, you are the last step, but you have to acknowledge that the whole process, that it wasn't like made out of the air. It was a whole
Right.
process with a lot of people involved. So that's something really important to have like the ownership of that. So based on this, what was the product, the coffee that was like a hit in Ugly Dog? Everyone was asking for, or how was the storytelling behind that? Do you make
Yeah,
campaign?
I would say our specialty drink that we have in the summer that people really get super excited about. We make a coffee slushy. So we get a slushy machine, and we figured out how to make a very simple coffee slushy that doesn't have any additives. And it's oat milk, it is some vanilla, some sugar, some salt, and a coffee concentrate that we came up with. And it's been super hot up here this summer, and people just love it. And this is the third year that we've been doing it. And as soon as it gets a little bit warm, people ask about it. So like that's like a big fan favorite of a coffee drink that we love. But honestly, like my favorite thing is every 3 months we bring on a new roaster, and being able to share new roasters in our community for that extended period of time for 3 months at a time is always my favorite. And it allows us to highlight that, yes, coffee is roasted here, but this is taken care of like this throughout the country and world. We're not beholden to just what our city's doing. You know what I mean? This is something that's happening in San Francisco, it's happening in Berlin, it's happening throughout the world. So our style of coffee that we're preparing is something that is happening everywhere, and we can highlight different roasters throughout the country. Just like people go to a bar and order different beers that are made in different states and countries, same thing for coffee. Like, we don't have to roast the coffee, we just are brewing it. We are trying not to get in the way of what's already happened and highlighting that opportunity and telling that story.
That's great, because I think when you are comparing the beer industry with the coffee industry, it's like, I think coffee industry it's so underestimated, but it's crazy. Like wine industry comparing with wine industry or beer industry, I think it has almost the same potential or more potential than this
Absolutely.
industry.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's crazy that you compared that. And you mentioned something about the slushy coffee that doesn't have additives. So do you focus on also like not wellness, but something like treat yourself good? Not
Yeah, I
only,
mean, we don't I
but
mean,
also, of
we have, syrups and things like that that we add to drinks because people want a caramel latte or vanilla latte. We do that, but
course.
when it comes to we try to balance, we don't try to cover up the flavor of coffee. And I think a lot of, like, say, frozen drinks or things like that, we don't want it to be a frozen drink. We want it to be a coffee drink. And so I think that's important to our identity, is that we're not covering up that aspect. As far as like wellness, I would say we just don't want to put more in something that doesn't need it from our perspective.
Great.
So that's where we're at. We just didn't want to overcomplicate it, and um and get over our heads and adding some other stuff that honestly doesn't need to be there.
That's true. Okay. And I love that you're making like networking and you're taking yourselves as the brewing steps with the roasters that you are inviting every 3 months, right? That's great. So you work with different roasters in the country or just close to you?
So throughout our country and in Canada, we've used different roasters too. Yeah. So we've tried to make some connections outside of North America, but that hasn't solidified. And it's not a never. We might, but it just hasn't happened yet. But we've connected with some roasters in Vancouver, in the Toronto area, in California, Texas, so Florida, all throughout the country. I think we're up to about 40 guest roasters that we've offered in the 10
Great.
years.
That's
Yeah,
fun.
which is, and we try to offer it too. Like, so we do 3 months because we want to give them an opportunity to have some stability. So, like, not every roaster we bring on is a larger roaster. Some of them are micro roasters, and we'll give them just as much value and space as we would a larger roaster, but we give them some stability. It's like 3 months, we're going to have this experience, and this is how much coffee we typically serve and order from guest roasters so they can prepare for that, right? So, and throughout that experience too, it's like a menu changes for them too. So it's not like they're always going to have a Colombian coffee, a Guatemalan coffee, and an Ethiopian coffee. Like, those change within our time with them. And every roaster has a slightly different style of roasting. So it also helps our team adjust to how they are serving the coffee and preparing the coffee and how dense a certain coffee is.
Of course.
So it gives them the opportunity and challenge for us too sometimes to highlight the best flavors out of those certain coffees and certain characteristics. And we get better at it the longer we work with a roaster. So it's a lot of fun.
That's great. That sounds awesome. And it's really important to also work with other companies, small businesses. And talking about small businesses to start closing up, what is your biggest advice for a small business or for a growing business in the coffee industry, of course?
Yeah. I get asked a lot locally by other folks that are interested in coffee. And my big thing is what to ask anybody and ask yourself, and this could be for a lot of folks, is what value are you bringing that already isn't there? Whether it's a neighborhood that you want to open a coffee shop in, or if you're a roaster, what kind of value are you bringing to the community that you're going to be in? And the other big thing, and maybe you've seen this too, is have you worked in the industry before? Has this idea of like, I want to open a coffee shop because of XYZ. It looks great. It looks fun. A lot of work and care really goes into it. And it's not easy. And I think folks don't understand what it can really take to care for the quality of coffee that you want to uphold, but also the people working within the business. So I think those things are super important. And I encourage folks to think about those things. Like, how are you going to treat your folks working for you? What are you bringing to the table as far as authenticity or something that isn't already served in its place? I think those things are important to think about, especially too in coffee. I would also say if you're opening a coffee shop, think about not only the space you're serving, but also how can you serve and take care of the equipment that you're bringing into, whether that's water quality that you're putting through your equipment, or is there technicians in your area? Lean on the folks that ask those questions that you're buying equipment from. Those things are super important because not a lot of people think about that when they're starting out. And they get in trouble when they buy $1,000 espresso machine and all of a sudden it
Yes.
stops working after a year because they didn't put a water filter on it.
Yes, that's true. Rory, thank you so much for joining this episode in Those Coffee People podcast and for taking the time. We really appreciate. And that's it. I think
Awesome.
that was a great episode.
Thank you. Well, thanks for having me. This was awesome.
Okay, great. Bye. Thank you.